This was a little under 2 years ago. Back then, I lived in a small two-story townhouse and worked remotely from home. The place had a small kitchen and living room on the first floor and two bedrooms on the second floor. One of those rooms I used as my office. During this time, the unit connected to mine that I shared a wall with was vacant. Nobody lived there or had moved in over 3 months. This night, I was working pretty late. It was rainy and cloudy outside, so I didn't have much else to do and decided to use the extra time to get ahead on work stuff. I sat in the office on my laptop for a good few hours. The house was quiet as usual, with the soft sounds of the rain outside ticking against the roof. I think it was just about 8 p.m. when, between the quiet clicking of my keyboard, I heard a thump on the wall next to me. I looked over, sort of confused, and heard it again. This was on the shared wall with the vacant unit, so naturally, it was kind of odd. After a few seconds of thinking, I thought that it must have been the owner checking up on something or maybe prepping the unit for a tour in the morning. Regardless, I continued working. Over the course of the next hour or so, I heard random sounds from the other units, creaks, thumps, and various other similar sounds. Oddly, they were spread out. Like I'd hear one creak, then several minutes would pass before I'd hear anything else. But then, at just about 9:30, I heard a door suddenly creak open and then pushed closed. This was louder than all the other sounds that I'd been hearing throughout the night, which made me feel kind of uneasy. It had been months since I'd heard the sound of the other unit's door open and close, so I didn't actually know how loud or quiet it usually was. After a minute, I decided to take a break and leave the office, heading downstairs just to make sure everything was good with the other unit. I looked out the window next to the front door, seeing if maybe the owner's car was out there, but I didn't see anything. Nothing parked on the driveway or on the road. Also, while down there, I didn't hear a single noise from the other unit. I figured whoever it was must have already left, and so hopefully all the strange noises were done for the night. After checking out the door and double-checking it was locked, I went right back upstairs to my office. I wasn't sure how much longer I really wanted to work for. At this point, I was feeling pretty tired and kind of just wanted to chill in bed for the rest of the night. But I told myself I'd do 30 more minutes. I closed the door to my office, sat down at my desk, and got as much done as I could. During that half hour, I never noticed any more of those sounds coming from the vacant units. Just the calm rain still trickling down outside. Finally feeling good about the work I'd gotten done and feeling my eyelids getting heavy, I shut off my laptop and headed out of the office. Turning off the hallway lights and going into my bedroom, I started getting myself ready for bed when a sudden, eerie, and ominous sound echoed through the walls of the house. Someone was whistling a slow, soft tune. I stood there silently listening for a few moments, I guess in shock of what I was hearing and how out of nowhere it came from. I quietly walked up to my bedroom door and cracked it open. As soon as I did, I could hear it much more clearly. It felt like it was too loud to be from the other unit or even outside. Feeling really unsettled, I started walking down the hallway as the whistling persisted, filling the quiet halls of the house with the eerie tune. I made my way down the steps and moved toward the back of the house where I could clearly hear the sound coming from. I peered around the corner into the living room. In the dark, unlit room, a man was sitting in the chair, facing the other way toward the black TV screen, continuing to whistle as he stared into the pitch-black room and barely moved. I could only see the general outline of him, but his hand that was on the armrest looked like it had something in it, like a small handgun. I knew he had to have known I was inside and probably heard me sneaking downstairs. Yet he never looked back. He just stared forward, whistling. It was incredibly disturbing. I didn't know whether to say something or try to sneak away. Why was he even here? How did he even get in? What did he want? My heart was beating faster and faster before I made the sudden decision to run out of the house. I swung open the front door, still hearing the man continue whistling as I ran away. I only looked back once and didn't see him follow, but I did notice the door to the other unit was wide open. I got to the end of the road and called for help. When police got there, they could hear from outside that same eerie tune being whistled from inside. They approached carefully, going down to the living room and finding the man in the exact same position. They said he turned his head slightly to look at them, giving a short, crooked smile, then dropping his gun and letting them arrest him. He basically spoke nothing of what he was doing, or had planned to do, or why he was there. Some of the officers I talked to thought he might have been trying to get arrested for some reason. But strangely, there's no information on the guy. No matching fingerprints or identification of any kind. And without him being cooperative, they had no way to find out who he really was, or if he had any kind of mental illness that could be behind all of it. I don't know what other ways that night could have gone down, but even thinking about other possibilities makes me uneasy. Every once in a while, though, I still hear that same eerie tune being whistled in the middle of my dreams, making me wake up in a panic, thinking he could be back. I was 16. I lived in a small home with my parents at the time, sort of on the outskirts of the city. It was in a smaller, wooded neighborhood about an hour outside of the main city area where both of my parents worked. This was on a regular weekday. It was pretty cloudy and rainy all day, and everyone was talking about this big storm that was supposedly rolling in later tonight. I didn't care too much, so long as I didn't have to walk home in it. Thankfully, it waited until school was out and for me to get home before the rain started picking up. Usually these storms are over-exaggerated, but as I watched TV in the living room with the windows open, the clouds got darker and darker, and then the rain got a lot worse. But honestly, the most unsettling thing was the wind. Our small, old, and basically wooden house was creaking and swaying as the wind slammed against it and rain crashed against the roof. Regardless, I was sure everything was good and kind of just listened to the storm as I watched TV and waited for my parents to get home. At about 5:30, though, my phone alarm suddenly screamed at me about a flash flood warning. Not too much later, my mom called. She said a bunch of the roads on the way home were apparently flooded over and that it was too dangerous for them to drive in, so they'd have to wait it out. I said I was good here, and the house seemed to be holding up, so it wasn't a big deal. Now knowing that my parents were stuck in the city, I got up and found something to eat in the kitchen. As I waited for my meal to heat up in the microwave, I thought I heard something that sounded like a knock, like something knocking on wood. It was so muffled by all the rain and wind that it was hard to tell. And I thought if it was anything, it was probably just something the wind was smacking against the house. So I ignored it. I grabbed my food and moved back over to the couch to watch TV. But before I could even start eating, I heard it again. This time, it kind of freaked me out because it sounded like it was at the front door, which was pretty much right next to me. And it was the exact same knocking pattern as the one I thought I'd heard when I was in the kitchen. Obviously, this made me think it had to be a person. But outside in this storm, that really didn't make any sense. I was too scared for a minute to even check out the door. So I kind of just sat frozen on the couch and waited for something to happen. But when nothing did, I finally got up and went over to check out the door. I walked up to the door and looked out the peephole. It was mostly fogged over. All I could see were the blurry shapes of heavy rain pouring down. I looked out there for a while, making sure I didn't see any figures move or something, but with no signs of anything. I felt safe opening the door. At first, I was relieved. Nobody was there. It was just the monstrous storm outside, but then I noticed something weird. In the mud coming up to the porch, there were footsteps. I couldn't actually make out the shoe print or anything, but it was clear by the repeating pattern through the mud that they were definitely footsteps. And given the weather, they had to be recent to not have been washed away already. I felt a chill run through my body before I abruptly closed the door. I was really freaked out, and really didn't know what to do. A rational side of me wanted to call my parents or maybe even the police, because this was really strange with the massive storm going on and for me being alone. But the other side of me didn't want to worry anyone over something that was hopefully nothing. I mean, they weren't on the porch, so they must have already left. At least that was my thought process. I stayed more alert, but refrained from calling anyone yet. I told myself if I saw or heard anything else, though, I'd call. I went back to the couch and ate my dinner, keeping the TV volume a bit lower so I could listen to the storm. Honestly, I don't remember much else from that part of the night, because at some point I just laid down and passed out, waiting for my parents to get home. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure why I'd woken up, but the whole house was dark, and the storm was just as loud as it was earlier. I knew a while had passed, though, and I was curious how I'd been able to sleep so long without my parents coming home and waking me up. I picked up my phone and checked the time, but immediately saw I had multiple missed calls and unopened texts from my parents. They were just asking if I was okay and said the roads were still too bad to drive in, and they had to get a hotel in the city for the night. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, not really processing any of the texts I read, and just trying to wake up still. And then I heard probably the most terrifying sound I could have heard in that moment. It was a single footstep on the wooden floor right above me, not something hitting the house or wind making the house creak. It was unmistakably a footstep inside the house, specifically in my bedroom, which was the room directly above me. My heart started racing as I listened for another few seconds. I followed the sound of the footsteps, staring at the ceiling as they slowly moved through my room. Then they started going toward the door into the upstairs hallway. I knew I had to act fast. I turned my phone on silent and quietly ran into the small downstairs bathroom in the main hallway, keeping the lights off and carefully closing the door behind me and locking it. I don't think they heard me. I opened my phone and turned the brightness on the lowest setting as I called 911. It was pitch black in there, aside from the dim phone screen. Once I saw that the call timer had started, meaning an operator answered, I whispered my name, my address, and what was happening, then went back to staying quiet while keeping the call going. I was afraid to even put my phone on the quietest volume to let me hear the operator, especially as I began hearing the footsteps making their way down the stairs. The low thumps slowly moved through the hallway, rain and wind filling the sound between each step. They walked right past the bathroom door. They kept on until they got to the kitchen. And then a few seconds passed as I waited for the next footstep. And then a few more seconds passed. Before I knew it, I was just waiting for any more sounds or for them to move, but I didn't hear anything. Several long, agonizing minutes passed until a sudden bang at the front door sounded and police called out. I ran out of the bathroom and opened the door, but it was apparent by the lack of any other sounds inside the house that the intruder was gone. The sliding back door was cracked open, leaving the eerie evidence of their absence. Likely, the sound of them breaking inside was drowned out by the heavy storm keeping me asleep. However, that could actually be the reason that I'm still here today. Whoever the intruder was seemed to only go through the hallway, upstairs, and into my bedroom. So, me staying asleep on the couch and not making myself known was probably for the best. Disturbingly, though, it seems clear that they were looking for me. What's really unnerving to think about, even today, years later, is that I never saw the person. So I literally know nothing about them. Whether they're a man or woman, teenager, me and my parents have been pretty on edge for the last few years, hoping whoever it was doesn't attempt to come back to continue whatever they had planned for that night. I live alone in a pretty quiet, cozy neighborhood in a suburban town outside of a small city. I'd been there for several years and really had no issues with it. I knew most of my neighbors and felt like our town was just really quiet and calm. Nothing much ever happened, and I was able to just live my life in peace. This was in the middle of spring. I'd gotten out of work after a long 12-hour shift, driving home in the dark around 9 p.m. The roads were empty, and the neighborhood was still in dark, as most people had been hunkered down inside from the pouring rain for the past several days now. I pulled into my home and went inside, warming up some leftovers in the oven and resting on the couch as I settled in for the night. Only 10-ish minutes after I'd gotten home, though, there was a rather loud knock at the front door. I was really put off by it, unsure who it could be or what it could be for. But I got up and saw a man standing on my porch. He had a black rain jacket on and looked drenched. I opened the door. "Can I help you with something?" The man looked at me for a moment. His eyes were droopy, like he was very tired, and his face was stiff and motionless. He looked a bit older than me, maybe in his early 30s, with a dark beard and longish brown hair, soaked by the rain. Finally, he answered, speaking slowly and without much emotion, explaining that his dog jumped his fence and he wanted to know if I'd seen it. I said, "No, that I haven't seen anything." He nodded in an understanding way, but his eyes wandered past me and into my house as he slowly turned away and walked off the porch. I closed the door. I thought the guy was kind of weird, but maybe he was just really tired and frustrated, especially with all this happening at night and in rainy weather. I hoped he'd find his dog soon, though. And aside from that, I went back to the couch and forgot about it. I want to say I was sitting there, watching TV for maybe 15 minutes, before there was a sudden knock at the front door again. Immediately, I was sure it was the same guy, but I had no idea why he'd come back. I got up very confused and sort of concerned as well. Sure enough, when I looked out, I saw the same guy standing behind the door. I opened it, and this time I wasn't quite as friendly, just straight up asking him what he wanted. He had that same cold look as before. The man pointed toward the side of my house and said he saw his dog run into my backyard and asked if he could go look around back there. The way he said it was kind of strange, though. I'm not sure how to explain it, but yeah, something was clearly not right. To get him off my back. And in case he was telling the truth, I said, sure. He could go back there and look around. He said, "Thank you." But at the same time as I was starting to close the door, he took a step forward, almost like he thought I was going to let him inside to lead him through the house to my back door. I just continued closing the door, though. I'm not sure why he would have thought that when he could easily just walk around the house and to my backyard. I looked out to make sure he left, and he did, going around to the side of my house. After all of that, though, I wasn't too comfortable with the guy just wandering around, so I went to the kitchen where I could watch out the back door. I didn't stare at him through the door or anything, but I cleaned up some stuff on the counters while occasionally looking back at what he was up to. Every time I looked, it seemed like he was just walking around the perimeter of the yard. Until one time I looked back and his face was right behind the glass looking in at me. It literally made me jump. I yelled through the glass, asking what he wanted. He called out, asking if his dog was inside my house. What the hell was wrong with this guy? I sternly said no, clearly showing that I was getting impatient with him. But the man kept asking, wanting me to let him in the house to look around for his dog. He'd bang on the door every time I wouldn't answer. I could see it in his face that he was getting unnervingly angry at the fact that I wouldn't let him in. It was getting kind of horrifying. As he kept hitting the door and yelling at me, I called the police. Only then, once he saw me take my phone out, did he finally stop and leave, which only made it more suspicious as to what he was truly up to. Police came and took a report from me of what happened and what he looked like and all that sort of stuff, but that's where it was left at. There wasn't much they could do right then and there. However, unfortunately, a week later, there was an incident really similar to mine. It's unclear if he forced his way in. War was just allowed inside by the victims, but the story was almost exactly the same as what happened to me. A man came knocking on their door looking for his dog, only for it to take an awful turn. It makes me even more disturbed by that night the man came by my place, doing the same thing. Had I listened to him or been any more willing to help, I could have suffered a similar fate to the others.